The underwater world, one of the Earth's last remaining frontiers. It is a powerful, strange, and mysterious place, a living wonderland of remarkable diversity and awe-inspiring beauty. Scuba diving is one of the most unique recreational activities known to man. As a scuba diver, you'll belong to an expanding group of modern explorers who take pride in and promote safe and responsible diving. As you might expect, most divers share a common love and respect for the Earth's sensitive environmental balance. A wonderful social activity, scuba diving can inspire the kind of quality friendships, experiences, and memories that can last a lifetime. A diverse and exciting sport, scuba diving presents a wide variety of diving opportunities that will continually challenge you. Imagine exploring an ageless shipwreck, lying lifeless on the ocean floor, or gliding effortlessly beneath graceful archways and ledges. Diving at night, underwater archaeology, search and recovery, underwater photography. Scuba diving offers something for everyone. A limitless opportunity to explore a new and exciting world. Man has always had a fascination with the sea. There is evidence of skin diving being used for gathering food, pearls, and for military applications for thousands of years. Commercial diving, using heavy hard helmets and air supplies from the surface, was developed in the early 1800s and continues even today using similar techniques. However, this method limits the diver's mobility because he is tethered to the surface by an air hose. It was not until 1943, when Jacques Cousteau and Frederick Dumas invented the aqualung, that the diver was freed from an umbilical cord to the surface. The aqualung took advantage of a number of inventions to combine a tank full of compressed air and regulator that delivered air to the diver on demand. This was truly the first self-contained underwater breathing apparatus, known today by its acronym, Scuba. From these early inventions, there have been numerous improvements and innovation in scuba equipment, quality, and design, but the basic principle remains. Amazingly enough, this unique technology has been pretty much the same for over 50 years. Probably the first thing the beginning scuba diver needs to know a lot about is skin diving equipment, specifically your mask and snorkel, and of course, your fins. We'll take a look at this equipment and find out how it's used. In order to see clearly, the human eye must be surrounded by air. If it's surrounded by water, objects appear blurry. The diving mask provides a layer of air for the eyes, so that clear vision becomes possible underwater. Masks come in a wide variety of sizes, colors, and types. If you wear glasses, you can even have prescription lenses incorporated into the mask. The mask skirt is generally made from either silicone or rubber, and incorporates a double seal for better fit and seal. The glass faceplate should be tempered glass to reduce the possibility of injury in the unlikely event that the glass should break. Although a plastic lens will not break, it is easily scratched and can cause distortion. All masks used for skin or scuba diving should have a nose pocket to enable you to pinch your nose. This is important so that you can equalize ear pressure during descent. Some masks are equipped with a purge valve, which lets water escape from the mask, but prevents water from flowing back in. While underwater, it is possible that water will get into your mask. However, it is not necessary to return to the surface to empty the mask. Instead, it can be done easily underwater by mask clearing. Mask clearing is one of the first skills you will learn as a student diver. Masks without a purge valve are cleared differently than those that have one. If your mask does not have a purge valve, the easiest way to clear it is to look to the surface, push the top of the mask against your forehead, and exhale through your nose. This will trap the air in the mask and displace the water. If your mask has a purge valve, it can be cleared by looking down, sealing the mask against your face, and then exhaling through your nose. Your instructor will demonstrate step by step how to clear whichever type of mask you have, and with some practice, you'll be able to clear your mask easily. The most important feature of the mask is fit. To see if a mask fits properly, first move the strap out of the way and then seat the mask on your face and inhale through your nose. If the mask does not leak air, then it fits well and will keep water out. Even though you will be diving with your mask on, you will need to know how to breathe without it. This is an important skill to know in the event that your mask gets dislodged from your face. The snorkel is a breathing tube which enables you to breathe surface air while your face is in the water. This greatly enhances your ability to breathe while surface swimming. You'll want to use the snorkel while at the surface so you don't deplete your tank's air supply. Snorkels are made of either rigid or flexible tube. The flexible snorkel enables the mouthpiece to drop away when the mouth is open. Some snorkels include a one-way purge valve that make them easier to clear of water. This is a popular feature for divers who desire less effort clearing. While swimming on the surface, water may splash into the end of the snorkel, and when you dive underwater, the snorkel will completely flood with water. In both cases, you will need to remove the water from the snorkel before you can breathe again. This is called snorkel clearing. The two ways to clear your snorkel are the blast and expansion methods. In the blast technique, you forcibly exhale air through the snorkel. This blows the water out of the top of the snorkel and enables you to breathe without lifting your head from the water. It resembles the blast a whale makes as he breaks the surface. The blast technique is the only way to clear a snorkel with a purge valve. In the displacement method, you simply tilt your head back while ascending. When your head is a few feet from the surface, begin exhaling through the snorkel. As you break the surface, quickly flip your head and inhale cautiously. Since the air was trapped in the snorkel while your head was tilted, the tube should be clear. While you are skin or scuba diving, you will be using your hands for many things: carrying equipment, taking photos, or working underwater. Consequently, you should not rely on your arms for propulsion, so you must rely on your legs to move about. Fins dramatically increase the effectiveness of kicking while in the water by enlarging the surface area of the foot. The kick will then require less effort and reduce leg fatigue. The footwell of the fin is available in either full foot or open heel. Generally, wetsuit boots are worn with open heel fins, and bare feet are used in full foot fins. Fins come in many varieties to accommodate a broad range of divers and conditions. Strong divers usually prefer large fins with stiff blades for greater power and speed. Other divers may opt for smaller, more flexible fins, which are easy to use but do not offer quite as much propulsion. There are a number of kicks that you should become familiar with so that you can switch during a dive to conserve energy. The flutter kick is the most common kick used. While performing the flutter kick, you should use the large muscle in your thighs. You can isolate these muscles by keeping your knees straight but relaxed. When swimming on the surface, try to keep your feet and fins underwater. In the frog kick, your knees are bent as your ankles stay together. Then bring your feet together forcibly for the power stroke of the kick. The scissor kick is performed on your side. Your knees are bent and legs separated. You then squeeze your legs together to create propulsion. Some divers find the dolphin kick to be very effective. Whichever kick you use, you should practice them so that you develop the muscles used for those kicks, increasing overall effectiveness and decreasing fatigue and cramping. If you're going for a swim, it's usually okay to just jump right into the water. But when wearing dive equipment, it is important that you employ a smooth transition into the water to be sure that you don't dislodge any equipment or become disoriented. The three most popular entry techniques used in scuba are the giant stride entry, the back roll entry, and the control seated entry. The giant stride entry is ideal for entering the water from a height such as a boat or a pier. While performing the entry, all of the equipment is already in place and the right hand holds the mask in place. The left hand holds any other equipment stable. As with all entries, some source of air is in the diver's mouth. First, step with one foot as far away from the entry point as possible. As you hit the water, bring both feet together. This will help keep your head above the water. The back roll entry is used in small boats that would be too unstable to stand up in. Again, all of the equipment is in place and the right hand holds the mask in place. Sit with your back to the water and have someone check the area behind you. Make sure you know what's beneath the water first. To enter the water, simply tuck your chin and bring your legs over your head. The safest and easiest entry is the control seated entry. It is perfect for entering the water from a stable surface close to the water's edge. After checking that all of your equipment is in place, sit with your feet in the water. Next, place both hands on the side of your body. Support your weight as you turn your back to the water. You then lower yourself gently into the water. Surface dives are used to easily propel you underwater when you are on the surface. There are two kinds of surface dives, the head first and the feet first. The head first surface dive is done by bending at the waist and lifting the legs high out of the water, directly over the body. The feet first surface dive is accomplished by kicking and bringing your arms together briskly to lift your body out of the water. As you sink below the surface, raise your arms up to help force you down. Next, tuck and roll forward, then simply swim down. In this brief introduction to scuba diving, you have learned some of the basic history and definitions that will be helpful during your training. We have also given you a broad overview of the purpose and use of skin diving equipment. Your instructor will provide you with a detailed explanation of each skill, and you will have plenty of time to practice these skills under supervision. Diving involves skills that cannot be learned by reading a book or watching a video. Listen to your instructor first. They know you and your diving situation best. We hope you've enjoyed this educational program, and we know that by following safe dive procedures and respecting the marine life you come in contact with, your future will hold years of rewarding experiences beneath the sea. We'll see you in the water. The best way to truly enjoy the sport of scuba diving is to know as much about the equipment you're using as possible. And that's why in this video we'll be taking a close-up look at all the equipment you'll need for a great time and safe diving. We'll also demonstrate and explain many of the skills that you'll master in your diving class. Because water is so much heavier than air, it takes 3,200 times more energy to warm water than it takes to warm the same amount of air. Consequently, water has the ability to draw heat from the body 25 times faster than air. Since you'll spend 20 minutes or more in the water on most of your dives, you'll need some sort of thermal protection in all but the warmest tropical waters. Thermal protection for divers comes in many forms. We'll discuss thermal insulation in the order of increasing insulation and provide some rough guidelines as to when different levels of protection are needed. It's important to remember that there are considerable individual variations and tolerances to temperature. These are only suggestions, not rules. The most common thermal protection used by sport divers is the wetsuit. Wetsuits are made of neoprene rubber sandwiched between two layers of nylon, lycra, or other similar material. They come in an endless variety of sizes, colors, styles, and configurations. The wetsuit keeps you warm by trapping a very thin layer of water next to your body. This small amount of water is then warmed by your body. Regardless of how cold the water is, the wetsuit envelops you in warmth. Unfortunately, this is not always a perfect system. As you move, some water is exchanged with the colder surrounding water. If the suit is too loose, too much cold water will enter the suit. If the suit's too tight, it will reduce circulation. The thermal protection afforded by the wetsuit is a function of two variables: the thickness of the neoprene and the surface area that the suit covers. In warm water, in the upper 70s and low 80s, thin suits are often worn with neoprene that's only 1/8 inch or 3 millimeters thick. In many cases, these are shorties, jumpsuits, or wetsuit jackets. As the water temperature goes below 80 degrees, there is usually a need to increase insulation. The most common and the most versatile wetsuit configuration is the 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters thick full wetsuit. Typically, full wetsuits have pants that resemble bibs or overalls and have straps that come up over the shoulders. Most commonly, a jacket is worn over the pants. This places a double layer of protection for the trunk of the body and allows the jacket or pants to be worn separately, depending on the temperature. As the water temperature gets into the 60s, most divers add a wetsuit hood and gloves for additional protection. Your head has a rich blood flow, a lot of surface area, and almost no insulation. It is therefore an area of significant heat loss. Your hands must stay warm to ensure the manual dexterity needed to manipulate dive equipment. The full 1/4 inch wetsuit with hood, boots, and gloves will typically keep you warm on dives in water temperatures into the 50s. In water less than 50 degrees, you may opt to increase your insulation by wearing a dry suit. This one-piece suit does not let any water contact the diver's skin except around the face. It uses watertight seals to keep the water completely out. Although they are not difficult to use, you should receive additional training in order to use them safely. The purpose of the weight belt is to counteract the positive buoyancy of thermal protection and the diver. The weight belt is really a simple piece of dive equipment, however, it is very commonly misused. The most common weight belt consists of nylon webbing with lead weights threaded onto it. The amount of weight that you will need to carry with you on a dive is highly variable. While it's generally a trial and error process, it also depends on the type of thermal protection you are wearing, your body composition, the other equipment you are using, and the type of water you are diving in. If you are properly weighted, you should easily be able to vertically float at the surface with a full breath of air in your lungs. It will take some trial and error to determine how much weight you will use in a wide range of conditions. This is good information for you to record in your logbook. The weight belt must be worn so that it can be easily and quickly removed. It should not be held in place by any equipment or straps. It should have some kind of quick release mechanism like a buckle to aid in its removal. It is common practice to release the belt with your right hand. As you descend beneath the surface, pressure from the surrounding water creates a compression effect, resulting in a loss of buoyancy. The buoyancy compensator, or BC, is a device used to control buoyancy. With proper use, you will be able to fine-tune your buoyancy, enhancing your ability to kick, hover, and move underwater. There are probably more styles of BCs on the market than any other piece of dive equipment. BCs come in a seemingly endless variety of configurations, constructions, and styles, with a multitude of available options. One of the most popular styles of BCs for open water diving is the jacket style. This design provides buoyancy and secures your tank to an integral backpack. Your instructor will provide you with more specific information, about the type of BC that you will be using. In order to achieve variable flotation, the BC must be able to add, hold, and release air out of the water or on the surface. This is usually achieved by orally inflating the vest. To do this, you must first take a deep breath and seal your mouth over the inflation mouthpiece. Depress the release button on the inflator mechanism, then blow into the vest. To prevent losing the air, be sure to release the button before you take your mouth off the mouthpiece. Above or underwater, air can be added directly from the tank by depressing the power inflation button. Although it is possible to orally inflate the vest underwater, it is much easier and more practical to use the air directly from your tank. It is important not to inflate the vest too quickly, so be sure to use short bursts of air and wait to see if your buoyancy is changed. The technique for deflating the BC varies according to its design. On BCs that incorporate a dump valve, the deflation mechanism is usually located at the highest point on the compensator. Be sure that you are in an upright position as you open the dump valve and make sure to release only small amounts of air. In vests without a dump valve, hold the oral inflator above your head and depress the deflator button to allow air to escape. Scuba tanks are available in many sizes and are made of either aluminum or steel. Tanks are often named by the material and the volume of gas that they hold. This tank is aluminum 80. That means it's made of aluminum, and at its maximum pressure, which is 3,000 pounds per square inch, it holds 80 cubic feet of air, about the size of a phone booth if not compressed. A valve in the neck of the tank allows air in and out of the tank. The K valve has a simple on-off mechanism and is the most common in the industry. The J valve, or constant reserve, has an on-off knob and lever. When the lever is set in the up position before a dive, the valve will stop off the flow of air at 300 psi. At this point, the lever can be flipped down and the remaining air can be used for a safe ascent to the surface. The J valve serves as a backup, low air warning system. However, it is rarely used today because it's difficult to always have the lever in the right position. Another type of valve is the DIN valve. This is a high pressure valve that is used on tanks that have a working pressure over 3,000 psi. It works on the same simple on-off principle as the K valve. To get compressed air from the tank, you will use what is called a demand regulator. As you demand air by drawing in, the air is delivered. As you start to exhale, it stops, making breathing underwater easy and effortless. All you have to do is breathe normally. When you stop inhaling, the flow of air stops. Your exhaled air is vented through a one-way valve and bubbles to the surface. So just by breathing normally, you will breathe properly. There are a number of parts of the regulator that you will need to be familiar with. The regulator has a first stage, an intermediate hose, and a second stage. On the first stage, you need to be able to identify the yoke screw, the dust cap, and the orifice. On the second stage, there is the mouthpiece, which goes in your mouth, exhaust ports, which vent exhaled air out of the regulator, and the purge valve, which is used to help clear the regulator of water. How the regulator works is really quite simple. High pressure air is delivered from the first stage through the intermediate hose to the second stage. The second stage has a rocker arm on-off valve. One end of the arm is in direct contact with the second stage diaphragm. When you breathe in, it moves the diaphragm in and opens the valve, which starts the air flowing. When you stop breathing, the diaphragm returns to its resting position and the flow of air stops. Your exhaled air is vented through the one-way valves in the second stage. Because of the design of the regulator, when the mouthpiece is removed while underwater, the second stage will flood with water. There are two simple methods of clearing the water from the second stage: the blow method and the purge method. The blow method is the most commonly used technique. Simply place the flooded regulator in your mouth and exhale forcefully into the exhaust valve in a down position. This will force all the water out of the exhaust valves, enabling you to breathe normally from the regulator. If you don't have enough air in your lungs to clear the regulator using the blow method, you can use the purge method. Simply place the flooded second stage in your mouth and block the mouthpiece with your tongue. Then, momentarily, press the purge button on the front of the regulator. This will automatically clear the second stage of water and enable you to breathe normally. The octopus regulator is an extra second stage regulator which is attached to your air supply. In the highly unlikely event of an out-of-air emergency, the octopus is a readily available alternative air source. You will be trained by your instructor on how to handle out-of-air emergencies and how to initiate a shared descent to the surface. For added safety, divers should always carry an alternate air source. Many beginning divers are concerned about running out of air underwater. With the introduction of the submersible pressure gauge, or SPG, and the standard requiring an SPG for all divers, this has become a very infrequent occurrence. The SPG is a dial that connects directly to the first stage of the regulator and displays a reading of exactly how much air is in the tank. It is a good idea to get into the habit of frequently checking the gauge to monitor air use and supply. You should always plan to be back on the surface with at least 500 psi left in your tank. One of the first scuba skills that you will need to master is how to properly assemble and dismantle the tank and regulator. The tank should be positioned with the valve opening facing away from you and the tank valve knob on your right side. Be sure to check that there is an O-ring in the valve opening. The backpack, which is usually attached to the BC, is then slid over the tank and secured so that the top of the BC is even with the neck of the tank. Be sure that the tank is fastened firmly to the backpack because straps often slip when they get wet. While you are positioned behind the tank, turn the air on for just a second to blow out any sand or moisture that may be present in the valve. Next, make sure that the rubber O-ring is in place around the valve opening and that it is in good condition. Unscrew the yoke screw from the first stage of the regulator and remove the dust cap. Position the regulator on the tank so that the valve opening lines up with the first stage fitting and the regulator goes over your right shoulder. Secure the yoke screw until it is finger tight. Do not over-tighten. Next, look at the SPG. Make sure it reads 0 with no air in the hoses. Turn the face of the SPG away from you and any other divers and turn on the air. Turn the valve all the way on, then back 1/4 of a turn. Read the pressure to verify that the tank is filled with air. Be sure to listen for leaks. If you hear one, turn the valve off and locate the source of the leak. During a dive, it is important to continually monitor how deep you are and how long you've been there. To determine the depth, we use a depth gauge. This is a pressure gauge that indicates the diver's depth on a dial or digital screen. Many depth gauges are equipped with maximum depth indicators that mark the greatest depth reached during that dive. Dive time can be tracked by using a watch rated to withstand the pressure of scuba diving. Dive watches rated for between 100 and 200 meters are recommended for any diving activity. Another way to monitor dive time is to use a bottom timer. Many of these devices have pressure switches that automatically turn on and off as the diver leaves and returns to the surface. Computers are very popular in scuba diving. Dive computers are used to track dive time and depth with tremendous accuracy. They also have the advantage of calculating how fast you can ascend and warn you if a decompression stop is needed. You can tell where you are during a dive by using an underwater compass and appropriate navigation techniques. Once you master these techniques, you'll be able to plan visits to interesting places without wasting valuable underwater time searching aimlessly. There are a number of thermometers that are designed for scuba diving. It's always a good idea to make the note of the water temperature in your logbook for future reference. While you're in the water, it's important to warn boaters to stay clear of the area. A diver down flag does just that. The two flags that are currently being used are the Alpha flag, used in international waters, and the traditional flag, used in the U.S. or in state waters. When diving from a boat, the flag should be flown from the mast. If you are diving in waters where boats are around, you may need to trail a flag on a float. The pool is a perfect place to learn how to scuba dive. Diving is a skill that cannot be learned by just reading a book or watching a video. Listen to your instructor first. They know you and your diving situation best. Perfecting your diving skills in the controlled environment of a pool will ease your transition into the open water environment, where you can explore the living grandeur of a coral reef, experience the wonders of gentle creatures who thrive beneath the surface, and witness the unique quality of the sea's larger mysteries. The sport of scuba diving offers a great escape for us air-breathing prisoners of dry land. It provides an exhilarating release from the bonds of gravity and gives us a three-dimensional freedom of movement that only a weightless environment can offer. Our freedom underwater, however, is limited. To adjust to the water, we must first understand the differences between our two-dimensional dry world and the subaquatic environment. The underwater world is alive with sounds. The clanging of equipment, exhaled air bubbling from divers' regulators, the crackling of coral, and the whirl of boat propellers. Sound waves travel very well underwater, and you will be able to hear them with amazing clarity. Out of the water, we are able to tell where sounds originate by a process called localization. This is possible because there is a time delay from when sound reaches one ear to when it reaches the other. Since sound travels about 4 times faster underwater, you won't be able to distinguish where noises come from. Some divers advocate pounding on your tank with a hard object as a way to communicate. Although this does create a very loud sound, you won't be able to follow the sound to reunite with a lost buddy. Sound that is generated in air does not travel well into the water. This is why you will not be able to hear someone speaking to you from above the water. And of course, while underwater, you won't be able to understand other divers trying to speak to you. There are more effective ways to communicate underwater. The most common method is through the use of hand signals. Your instructor will teach you the many standardized hand signals used underwater. You will be amazed how well you'll be able to communicate with some practice. Another way of underwater communication is by writing on an underwater slate. This enables specific information to be shared without confusion. On the surface, it is very ineffective to yell long distances. For surface communication, you will either use hand signals, a whistle, flare, or an inflatable device. As you probably already know, the human eye was never designed to see clearly underwater, which is why it was the invention of this piece of equipment, the mask, that opened up a whole new world to the underwater explorer. To see a sharp image underwater, the lens in your eye must be able to focus a sharp image on your retina. Unfortunately, when the surface of the eye directly contacts the water, this cannot be done. To see properly, you need to put a layer of air in front of your face and look through a piece of glass. This is the function of the mask, which will enable you to see with remarkable clarity. In fact, the bending of the light rays underwater causes a magnification effect which actually helps you to see approximately 25% larger or closer. As you descend beneath the surface, light is filtered through the water. Bright colors like red, orange, and yellow disappear first. Even in very clear water, only blues and greens remain after about 60 feet. All other colors will appear dull and blue. You'll notice colors disappearing rapidly as you descend underwater. To see an object's true colors at depth, you need to take an artificial light source with you. The light will illuminate the object and allow you to see it in all of its true splendor. How far you see underwater is primarily dependent upon the turbidity or cloudiness of the water. Turbid water has suspended particles like fine sand, silt, or even marine animals. The more turbid the water, the lower the visibility. The concept of buoyancy can be difficult to appreciate for people who have spent their lives on dry land. An object that weighs less than the same volume of water, for instance cork, when placed in water will float. We call this positive buoyancy. An object that weighs more than an equal volume of water, for instance lead, will sink when placed in water. This is called negative buoyancy. If an object weighs the same as water, it will neither sink nor float, but rather stay at the depth that it was placed. This is called neutral buoyancy. In scuba diving, we use these principles to make diving easy and effortless. Your body consists of about 60% water. This makes the majority of your body neutrally buoyant. There are some structures like bone and muscles that are heavier than water. Other structures, such as fat, are lighter than water. You have two large air-filled lungs that provide flotation. With a full breath of air in your lungs, you should be able to float easily at the surface. You will notice that as you exhale, you sink below the surface. When you are on the surface and want to stay there, you will want to be positively buoyant. This will help you swim and move without expending energy to stay afloat. When you want to descend, you will want to be slightly negatively buoyant, allowing you to descend slowly and in a controlled manner. While swimming underwater, you will want to be neutrally buoyant so that you do not have to work to stay underwater or off the sensitive coral. Compare the diver to the left, who is negatively buoyant, to the diver on the right, who is positively buoyant. The diver in the middle has achieved neutral buoyancy. After you dive, you will want to be slightly buoyant in order to slowly return to the surface without having to actively swim up. Your weight belt and buoyancy compensator actually work together to help you achieve variable flotation and the desired buoyancy. The weight belt is used to increase negative buoyancy by adding weight. The BC increases positive buoyancy when air is added. You can add as much or as little air as needed to fine-tune your buoyancy and minimize the effort of diving, provided that you are not overweighted. Other factors that affect your buoyancy include your thermal protection, equipment that you carry, amount of air in your tank, and the amount of air in your lungs. Because water is so much more dense than air, pressure increases quickly and dramatically as you descend. In fact, you are subjected to twice as much pressure at only 33 feet underwater as you experience on the surface. Pressure does not directly affect the parts of the body that are fluid-filled. Air spaces in your body, however, will respond to increasing pressure by decreasing in volume. Watch what happens to these sealed water bottles as we take them deeper underwater. All of the air spaces in your body are subjected to this decreased volume. In order to prevent any discomfort, we must keep the pressure inside the airspace the same as the surrounding water pressure by a process called equalization. Equalization is done by moving air from one place to another. Anyone who has gone to the bottom of a deep swimming pool can remember some discomfort in their ears. This is caused by a decrease in the volume of air in the middle ear, which stretches the eardrum and causes discomfort or pain. If you ignore this pain, fluid will leak into your middle ear or you will rupture the eardrum. Never ignore ear pain on a dive. To equalize the pressure in your middle ear, simply close your mouth, pinch your nose, and exhale gently. This forces air into the middle ear through the eustachian tube and the eardrum moves back into position. As long as you don't dive with a cold, this procedure also equalizes the pressure in your sinuses. Never dive if you are congested, have recently been ill, or feel a cold coming on. The key to performing this simple skill is to do it early and often during your descent. This will prevent any ear or sinus discomfort. Your instructor will provide a more detailed explanation of how to equalize during your dive and how to handle any difficulty. During your ascent to the surface, you will experience the effects of decreasing pressure. You'll feel the air in your middle ear and sinus expand as you rise and may feel a pop as the increased volume of air is vented through the eustachian tube. Your regulator is designed to allow you to breathe normally, providing the proper volume of air by automatically adjusting to the surrounding pressure. With some practice, you will find that breathing on Scuba is easy and requires no conscious thought. Because you consume more air with each breath underwater than at the surface, your air supply will not last as long. In fact, your tank will only last half as long at 33 feet, 1/3 as long at 66 feet, and 1/4 as long at 99 feet. As we mentioned earlier, the regulator automatically adjusts to the surrounding pressure. As long as you continue to breathe normally during your ascent to the surface, you will be taking the proper amount of air with each breath. If a diver was to hold his breath during an ascent, the decreasing pressure would cause the air in the lungs to expand. If the expanding air could not escape through the mouth, it could cause many problems. These problems can result in dangerous diving injuries. Fortunately, it is an exceedingly rare occurrence because the prevention is simply to breathe normally through the entire ascent to the surface. The most important rule of Scuba: always breathe normally and continuously. Never hold your breath. If something prevents you from breathing normally, you should be exhaling continuously. Your instructor will discuss this in great detail and provide you with specific strategies to prevent any pressure-related difficulties. It's easy to be envious of the grace and ease of underwater creatures as they move through their environment. But it is important to remember that you are only a visitor to this new and exciting world. As you venture into this unfamiliar aquatic world, you must adjust to the differences caused by the viscosity of the medium. Remember, diving is a skill that cannot be learned by just reading a book or watching a video. Listen to your instructor first. They know you and your diving situation best.
A lot of beginning scuba divers are under the impression that the only thing that determines how long you can stay underwater is the amount of air left in your tank. If only that were the case. Unfortunately, there's a lot of factors that determine how deep you can go and how long you can stay there.
Human tissue can be exposed to extremely high pressure without damage, but it is the indirect effects of breathing air under pressure that will limit your depth and dive time. In this video, we will present the indirect effects of pressure and the two consequences of breathing air at high pressure: nitrogen narcosis and decompression sickness. The air you breathe under pressure, or the air in your scuba cylinder, is clean, dried, compressed, and filtered air. This high-pressure air has the same composition as the air on the surface, approximately 80% nitrogen and 20% oxygen. On the surface, nitrogen has no effect on your body and is said to be inert. Under pressure, however, nitrogen causes a number of physiological changes. The sport diving industry has established guidelines to help you avoid difficulties with high-pressure nitrogen. Most experts recommend that beginning divers should limit their dives to 60 feet. As your experience increases, you may consider venturing as deep as 100 feet. But for this depth, it's a good idea to get additional training. Even deeper dives are possible, but they definitely require additional training and sophisticated equipment. At first, you may feel these limits are restrictive, but you will quickly realize that most diving is done in shallow water, where you'll find the majority of sea life and sunlight. In addition, the water is warmer, your air supply will last longer, and you are safer. Nitrogen under high pressure affects the central nervous system, causing a dangerous impairment of your judgment. Rapture of the deep is the term coined by Jacques Cousteau and Frédéric Dumas to describe the narcotics of nitrogen. This phenomenon is known as nitrogen narcosis and is a serious concern for divers. Nitrogen narcosis can impair your ability to think clearly, react to your environment, and make decisions underwater. The depth at which the symptoms of nitrogen narcosis begin is highly variable from diver to diver. Most divers will begin to notice some effects of nitrogen narcosis at about 80 to 100 feet. By the time you notice the signs, however, your judgment has already been significantly affected. A number of factors can make you more susceptible to nitrogen narcosis. These include fatigue, cold, alcohol use, anxiety, smoking, age, and being overweight. Although the exact causes of nitrogen narcosis are debatable, its prevention is simple. As long as you avoid deep dives, you will not suffer from the mentally debilitating effects of high-pressure nitrogen. If at any point during a dive you feel drowsy, lightheaded or dizzy, overconfident, tingling in your hands or feet, or uncoordinated, you must descend to shallow waters immediately. These signs generally disappear as soon as you return to shallower water. The most dangerous facet of nitrogen narcosis is its gradual and insidious onset. It is sometimes difficult to detect, even by experienced divers. You must constantly be aware of the possibility of your judgment and skills being affected by nitrogen narcosis. Failure to do so can lead to bad decisions underwater. Decompression sickness was first reported in the 19th century by bridge builders working in pressurized shafts called caissons. As these workers returned to the surface, some had pain in their joints, while others experienced a choking sensation. This ailment became known as caisson's disease and was given the nickname the bends, since many of the victims found that keeping their joints bent relieved some of the pain. In 1878, it was theorized that caisson's disease was caused by nitrogen. It was presumed that nitrogen was dissolved in the body while breathing at depth. If pressure was reduced too quickly, this nitrogen would form bubbles in the body. These bubbles cause tissue damage, blockage in blood vessels, pressure on nerves, and clotting disorders. This affliction was then given the appropriate name, decompression sickness. In order to understand decompression sickness, also known as DCS, it's useful to understand how your body absorbs nitrogen during a dive. At any given pressure, your body can only absorb a certain amount of nitrogen. Right now, your body is saturated with the maximum amount of nitrogen it can hold, meaning for this atmospheric pressure, your body has as much nitrogen as it can hold. This isn't a problem because the gas is dissolved in the fluids of your body. It is in solution. As you descend underwater, the amount of nitrogen that can be dissolved in your body increases. The amount of nitrogen dissolved depends on the depth of the dive and the amount of time that you are there. With every breath you take, more nitrogen is brought into your lungs and dissolved in your body. As you ascend, pressure decreases. As long as this pressure change is slow, you will be able to eliminate absorbed nitrogen through your lungs by breathing. If you ascend too rapidly, the tissues will not be able to hold the dissolved nitrogen and bubbles will form. These nitrogen bubbles can form in almost any body tissue, But some areas are more susceptible than others. The most frequent place for bubbles to collect is in the skeletal muscles and joints. The most serious form of decompression sickness is when bubbles collect in the brain or spinal cord, possibly causing paralysis. Decompression sickness can also affect the lungs, skin, eyes, and balance mechanism. The most common symptoms of decompression sickness is joint pain. Other signs and symptoms may include burning, numbness or tingling in the arms or legs, paralysis, difficulty breathing, itching or a rash, dizziness, blurred vision, or unconsciousness. These signs or symptoms usually develop within the first few hours of surfacing, but have been known to be delayed as long as 36 hours. If you were to notice any of these symptoms after a dive, it is imperative that you seek medical attention immediately. The probability of a full recovery decreases significantly the longer you wait to get treatment. Your instructor will discuss the proper first aid for a diver who is displaying signs or symptoms of decompression sickness. Anyone experiencing any of these symptoms must be seen at the nearest emergency center immediately. Medical transportation can be arranged by the Coast Guard, ambulance, or helicopter. If it is determined that this is a diving-related injury, the diver will probably be treated by recompression in a hyperbaric chamber. By increasing the pressure on the diver's body, the size of the bubbles are reduced and the gas is forced back into solution and exhaled through the lungs during a very slow decrease in pressure. Fortunately, the prevention of decompression sickness is easy. Quite simply, if you stay within the depth and time guidelines and ascend slowly, you will probably avoid the bends. The first depth and time limits were developed in Great Britain in the early 1900s. These no decompression tables established how long you can dive to a given depth and how to return to the surface safely. Since that time, many different types of dive tables have been developed. The most commonly used and extensively tested dive tables were developed by the United States Navy. These dive tables were designed for young, healthy military divers. When used by sport divers, these tables should be used very conservatively. Recently, there have been a number of dive tables developed specifically for sport divers. Your instructor will show you how to use dive tables that he believes are best for you. They will discuss the rules, terminology, ascent rate, and proper use of the tables. And with a little practice, you will find them easy to use. You must realize that the rate of absorption and release of nitrogen vary from person to person. There are certain individuals who are more likely to suffer from decompression sickness. If you are a smoker, over 40, overweight, or have had muscular or skeletal injuries causing scar tissue, you are more susceptible to decompression sickness. Alcohol, consumption before or after a dive, fatigue, cold water, hard work underwater, and dehydration also increase your risk. As a result, no dive table can eliminate the risk of decompression sickness. All dive tables are guidelines and should be used cautiously and conservatively. Rest assured that through strict adherence to safe diving practices and following your dive table guidelines, the incidence of decompression sickness is very small. Never push the limits of any dive tables. Computer technology has dramatically changed diving. The ability to program a microchip with dive table information and to be able to monitor depth and dive time with incredible accuracy has caused nothing short of a revolution in scuba diving. Decompression computers make it easier to keep track of bottom time and dive depth, reducing the possibility of making an error while manually calculating decompression tables. Dive computers generally use different formulas than dive tables use. This is possible because most dive tables assume that you will have descended straight to the bottom, stayed at a constant depth, and ascended straight to the surface. Since a dive computer can monitor depth throughout the dive, it can calculate your decompression requirements based on your exact dive profile. There are a few rules that apply to computer diving. The most important are: read the owner's manual carefully, follow all of the manufacturer's rules exactly, dive conservatively, and stay clear of staged decompression dives. Each diver must have their own computer. Do not share one with a buddy. Dive tables and dive computers calculate the amount of time you stay underwater given specific ascent rates. If you ascend faster than specified, you are in serious jeopardy of suffering from decompression sickness. Be sure to follow the ascent rules exactly. Some computers monitor your ascent rate and have an alarm if you ascend too quickly. If you do not have a dive computer, you should monitor your depth gauge while ascending. A rule of thumb is that the smallest exhaled bubbles rise at the rate of 1 foot per second. Since 1 foot per second is the ascent rate of most dive tables, you should not come up faster than any of your bubbles. Remember, no device can prevent decompression sickness. Computers and tables establish theoretical limits which approximate nitrogen absorption and release during a dive. They do not monitor the actual amount of nitrogen in your body. There are considerable differences between divers, and you must use these devices intelligently and conservatively to be safe. They are guidelines to help you plan safe dives and dive safe plans. Dive tables and most dive computers assume you are diving at sea level. If you are diving at altitude, you are returning to less pressure than at sea level, and the tables must be modified. Some dive computers do this automatically. Be sure to check the maximum altitude that your dive tables can be safely used. You may have to modify the tables or obtain special high-altitude tables. Flying after diving can pose another difficulty. If you ascend in an aircraft, pressure decreases. Even cabins in commercial aircraft are not pressurized to sea level. Most dive tables recommend you do not fly for a specified period of time after diving. A general rule is 12 to 24 hours. Scuba diving is one of the most exciting, fascinating, and exhilarating recreational activities. Man has always longed to have the freedom and grace of creatures who spend their lives underwater. Modern scuba equipment enables us to experience for short periods of time the beauty and serenity of life beneath the waves. Our excursions, however, are not unlimited. Understanding and adherence to a few safety rules will make our adventures safe and enjoyable. The underwater world is in delicate balance. Life beneath the waves has evolved over millions of years. Recently, the underwater environment has suffered extraordinary damage due to our lack of understanding. It is our responsibility as visitors to this marvelous kingdom to take an active role in protecting it from destruction. A thorough understanding of the fragility of the aquatic sanctuary will enable us to keep it safe for everyone. In this video, we will talk about fresh and saltwater diving, the movement of water, and the animals that you are likely to see while underwater. We will conclude with a discussion on dive planning and careers in diving. Both fresh and saltwater environments offer a tremendous amount of versatility and exciting dive opportunities. So no matter where you live, you're close to good diving. The tropics lie on both sides of the equator and have some of the most beautiful diving in the world. Because of the position of the sun, the water is warm all year. Constant warm water temperatures enables a great variety of plants and animals to flourish. Coral are tiny animals whose skeleton forms a stony mass. Colonies of coral form reefs, and these reefs are the basis of tropical marine life. These coral formations provide food, shelter, and protection to thousands of reef inhabitants. Reef formations can be categorized according to depths. The deep reef from 80 to 100 feet, the mid reef from 20 to 40 feet, and the shallow reef from 15 feet to the surface. The deep and mid-reefs are the remnants of old coral formations that grew when the surface of the oceans was lower. The deep and mid-reefs contain large numbers of coral colonies that have grown together. They often appear to be solid and massive, but they are often filled with canyons, crevices, caves, and passageways. The shallow reef is the most alive and ever-changing part of the reef. Young and new life is constantly growing in the bright, clear, shallow waters. There is a wide variety of corals that make up the reef. Hard corals, like this elkhorn coral, can be very sharp and cause scrapes to the careless diver. Large, round brain coral is named appropriately because the wiggly, folded texture resembles the convolutions of a brain. Fire coral resembles red flames, but its name has dual meaning, since contact with its toxic stingers can cause an intense burning sensation. Flexible, soft corals look more like plants than animals. Most of them remain beautiful underwater, but when taken from their natural environment, die, get hard, and dull. Although it looks solid and tough, coral is actually delicate and fragile. It takes years to grow, and only a moment of carelessness on the diver's part can cause irreparable damage. Another tropical reef dweller is a relative of the household sponge. Sponges come in an extraordinary variety of shapes, sizes, and colors. Other animals without spinal columns include bristleworms, which are amazingly abundant in the tropics. Sea anemones are the flowers of the sea. Although they look like plants, they are actually animals that can change size, shape, and color. Feather dusters and Christmas tree worms are amazing animals. Their plumage is used to filter food from the water. These animals protect themselves by retracting into a protective tube when touched. The reef provides shelter and camouflage for some of the most interesting underwater creatures. These reef inhabitants are very small and require careful observation. These tiny creatures provide an abundance of food for larger animals. Fish and crustaceans abound on the reef. These fish serve to draw larger hunters into the reef. Some of these predators represent the highest position on the food chain. Having the opportunity to see sharks and barracuda in their natural and unspoiled environment is one of the most thrilling experiences you will have as a diver. Contrary to popular belief, these creatures present very little danger to the educated and well-trained diver. It is truly an incredible experience just to see them. In the water that lies further from the equator, the colder ocean environments are rich with different underwater plant and animal life. In colder water, coral cannot grow in the abundance found in the tropics. The ocean floor in these regions consists of rock and sand. Instead of the reef providing shelter, ecosystems develop around natural and man-made structures of colder ocean environments. In some cold water ocean environments, a strong-rooted seaweed called kelp grows from depths of over 75 feet. Kelp provides the same protection, food, and shelter for cold water creatures as the reef provides for warm water inhabitants. While the ocean is filled with a great variety of life and color, freshwater diving sites offer unparalleled variation in diving experiences. Lakes offer great opportunities for inland diving. Many freshwater dive sites have abundant communities of underwater life and other fascinating attractions. River diving can be a thoroughly unique and active diving experience. Sand pits, quarries, natural caves, sinkholes, springs, and mines are just a few other freshwater diving sites that provide excitement and challenge to the inland diver. There are a few rules that you should keep in mind regarding underwater life. While it is true that some underwater creatures have the ability to inflict harm on divers, this is an extremely rare occurrence. All life, above and below the surface, has protective mechanisms to keep them safe from their enemies. Divers that are injured by marine life have almost always intentionally or unintentionally provoked the animal into defending itself. Some underwater animals can bite, and those bites can result in serious injuries. Other animals protect themselves by stinging or injecting toxins. Most of these stings are painful, but a few can be life-threatening. If you are stung while underwater, you should surface immediately and consult a diving first aid book for the proper emergency care. Adherence to a few safety rules will enable you to avoid these problems entirely. First, if you don't know what it is, don't touch it. Not only does touching threaten some species, it can cause extensive damage to underwater life. Second, control your buoyancy, preventing you from accidentally bumping into a harmful object. Always wear some type of protective clothing and gloves. This covering will minimize coral scrapes and jellyfish stings. Finally, never put your hand into any hole or crevice. These hiding places serve as home to many underwater creatures. No matter what the diving environment, you must understand and use water movement to your advantage. Working with, not against the water, will make your dives easy and relaxing. The movement of water is caused by many factors. The rotations of the planets, wind, and localized underwater obstacles are the major causes of water movement that we will discuss. Let's first look at tides. Tides are caused by gravitational pull of the moon on the Earth and the rotation of the Earth. Even though it appears that the moon orbits the Earth and moon both orbit around a center point. As the Earth moves around this point, a bulge of water forms on the side of the Earth opposite the moon. The rise and fall of water during tides is one cause of current, which is the horizontal movement of water. When water is flowing toward land, it is referred to as flood current. When water is flowing away from land, it is referred to as ebb current. A slack period occurs as water flow changes direction. The point where flood current stops is called the slack before the ebb. The point where the ebb current stops is the slack before the flood. When making a shore dive, enter during the slack before the flood. This will enable the flood current at the end of the dive to bring you back to shore. By consulting local tide tables, you can estimate the direction and speed of the current, as well as the approximate times for the slack and maximum flows. Another, less dramatic movement of water is the ocean currents. These rivers in the sea are primarily the result of constant winds, differences in water density, underwater topography, and the rotation of the Earth. Wind is a major cause of water movement and current because wind causes waves. An extremely strong wind blowing for a long time over great distances can produce enormous waves with a large accumulation of energy. This accumulated energy is expelled in a rush of white water as the wave breaks. The surface energy of the wave is transmitted underwater as surge. Surge is the back and forth movement of water below the surface. The amount of surge is directly proportional to the size of the wave and the depth of the water. Surge can make it difficult to control yourself underwater. Surge can cause you to bump into objects, harming underwater life, and inflicting scrapes and abrasions upon yourself. Fortunately, surge is often avoidable by seeking a deeper dive site. Waves that arrive at the beach usually come from more than one source. These waves are rarely synchronized. When making a shore entry, take a few minutes to watch the wave sets so that you can time your entry to be during the low waves. Waves cause a number of currents. Usually, water flowing back to sea collides with the energy of the next wave. If there is an opening in a submerged reef or sandbar, the backwash rushes out to sea and at great speeds. This fast-moving current is called a rip current and can carry a diver miles from shore. Waves breaking at a distance from shore usually indicate a submerged reef, sandbar, or drop-off. All of these underwater structures can create rip currents. Remember never to swim against a rip current. Always swim at right angles to it. Eventually, the rip current slows down and circulates back towards the beach. As you swim at right angles, you will eventually reach the incoming water, which will carry you back to shore. If you attempt to swim against the current, you will quickly tire. When wind and waves travel toward shore at an angle to the beach, the backwash causes a longshore current that runs roughly parallel to the length of the beach. Longshore currents can carry you some distance from your entry point. you should plan to begin your dive into the current or exit downstream of the current. A jetty, point, or cove formation along a beach can contribute to a variety of current systems. It is important to plan entries and exits to take advantage of currents. Enter where the current will gently take you out to sea, and exit where you can take advantage of incoming water. The most important rule about diving in gentle current is to always begin your dive into the current. This will enable you to swim against the current while you are fresh and strong. You will be able to ride the current back to your exit point at the end of your dive when you are tired. You'll be surprised how difficult it can be to swim against even a light current. If you are diving from a boat, the boat will be downstream from the anchor. You should use the anchor line as a reference point as you descend, and always stay upstream of the anchor. No matter where you are going to dive, there are a few things that you must consider before you actually get into the water. This is called dive planning. Dive planning can be broken down into long-term planning, dive planning, and pre-dive plan. Long-term planning includes conditioning and training. In order to be a safe diver, you must be in good physical condition. This enables you to be relaxed and calm while diving. A regular conditioning program should be part of your weekly activities. Swimming with and without fins and snorkeling are excellent ways of keeping fit for diving, since you will be using the same muscle groups. Training is also part of the proper planning and preparation for diving. It is very important to be properly trained for a dive by a qualified instructor. If your dive objective includes specialty diving, be sure to seek additional education. If it has been a while since your last dive, it is important to receive some refresher training before returning to the sport. After selecting your dive buddy and before you go diving, you will need to discuss a number of topics with your dive buddy. The first item that you will need to agree upon is a dive objective. Are you and your buddy interested in taking underwater pictures or wreck diving? Are you trying to find underwater treasures or taking a look at nocturnal marine life? Identifying the dive objective will make it easier to plan the other aspects of the dive, including where you are going to dive, what kind of equipment you will need, and other logistical considerations. After you have decided on a dive objective, you will need to scout for a dive site that satisfies the requirements of the dive. Specifically, you should try to find out the dive's depth, water and air temperature, expected visibility, hazard, local surfs and tides, currents, bottom type and composition, underwater life, and emergency contact information. If neither you or your buddy have been to the site, you can rely on a number of sources for information. One of the best sources is your local dive store or a diving instructor. Either can usually provide you considerable information about interesting places to go. Local divers are another potential source of information. If all else fails, there are a number of books and publications that list dive sites, and some provide extensive and complete information about local diving. Once you decide on a dive site, you should inspect and prepare your equipment long before the dive day. Packing and inspecting your equipment in advance will considerably reduce the possibility of having last-minute problems that can be frustrating and dangerous. Be sure to check that all equipment is in proper working order, that it has all been through the proper inspections, and that no hoses or straps are worn. As you pack for your dive, be sure to use a checklist like the one found in the back of the Jeppesen Open Water Sport Diver Manual. Using a checklist will ensure that you do not forget or overlook anything that will be important on the day of the dive. You should pack the items that you will need first, like the BC and regulator, last, so that they are on top and easily accessible. When planning for your dive, you should check to see if the people running the dive are planning to supply all of the emergency first aid and oxygen equipment needed to dive safely. If not, you must make plans to have that equipment readily accessible in the unlikely event of an emergency. As the day of the dive draws near, keep an eye on the weather forecast. The night before the dive, be sure to get plenty of rest, abstain from drinking alcohol, and eat properly. You will find that equalization will be easier if you practice the day before the dive. Every time that you think about it, equalize your ears. The day of the dive, get up in plenty of time to be at the dive site or to meet the boat without having to rush. Have a healthy and hearty breakfast, being sure to drink plenty of fluids and avoiding caffeine. If for any reason you do not feel well or are having difficulty equalizing, you should cancel the dive. The pre-dive plan is generally done as you are going to the dive site. The pre-dive plan includes a conditions evaluation, a review of the dive objective, dive table calculations, hand signals, emergency procedures, and a pre-dive equipment check. As you continuously assess the conditions to determine if the dive is going to be fun, safe, and pleasant. Pay close attention to the weather conditions, air and water temperature, wind, wave, surge, currents, and visibility. If for any reason the dive conditions are not favorable, you should consider moving to an alternate dive site or canceling the dive. There is no reason you should feel pressured to complete a dive. After you have determined that the conditions are favorable for an enjoyable dive, you should review the dive objective with your buddy. Agree on the specifics of the dive. These will include where will we get ready and dress for the dive, where will we enter the water, how will we descend, what is the maximum depth that we will go, in which direction will we swim, who will lead the buddy team, how will we know to end the dive, how will we ascend, where will we exit the water. After all of these questions are answered, you have the beginnings of a dive plan. You should next be sure that your plan for the dive depth and the time fall within the guidelines established by the dive tables. Be sure to independently calculate your decompression requirements and compare your results. This will help to ensure accuracy. Before you get into the water, you should review the basic hand signals that you will use to communicate underwater. Although many hand signals are standardized, everybody has their own variations that they like to use. It can be very confusing and frustrating to be misunderstood underwater. A few seconds reviewing some common hand signals will reduce this likelihood. You and your buddy should also discuss what to do in the event of an emergency. You should also decide what to do if you become separated, have difficulty clearing your ears, or run out of air. Planning for such occurrences will decrease your anxiety about what you will do if they happen and will enable you to concentrate on the enjoyment of the dive. Making a thorough dive plan is only half the battle. The next part is to follow it. There is a popular saying in diving that you should plan your dive and dive your plan. Following this rule will enable you to use the time underwater more efficiently and get more out of diving. Finally, just before you and your buddy get into the water, you should complete your pre-dive equipment check. As a rule, you should know your buddy's equipment as well as you know your own. It is useful to follow a standardized format to be sure that you don't forget or overlook anything. One format is the BWARE system. The B, W, A, R, and E stand for 5 things that you should check on your buddy's equipment. B stands for buoyancy compensator. Does your buddy have the BC on properly? Is the BC in proper working order, and does it hold air as it's supposed to? Is the power inflator hose connected, and is it working properly to inflate and deflate the vest? Can you locate and operate the inflator mechanism quickly if you had to assist your buddy? W stands for weights. Is your buddy's weight belt on properly? Does it have a quick release mechanism that will enable it to be removed with the right hand? Is your buddy properly weighted? Is there any equipment that would interfere with getting rid of the belt in an emergency? A stands for air. How much air is in your buddy's tank? Is the tank securely held into the backpack? Is the regulator properly connected and functioning? Where is his or her alternate air in the event of an out-of-air emergency? R stands for releases. Are all of your buddy's buckles and straps properly positioned and secured? And finally, E stands for everything in OK. It is the last check to be sure that both you and your buddy are physically and psychologically prepared for the dive. If the dive plan is reviewed, the dive table is confirmed, hand signals and emergency procedures are reviewed, and the equipment checked, it is time to get into the water and have a well-planned and relaxing dive. With proper planning, all of your dives will be a special and rewarding experience. The sport diving industry offers many options for people interested in diving instruction and supervision. The first step to becoming a diving instructor is to gain experience as an open water diver. Scuba instructor training programs are sponsored by national certification agencies to teach future leaders the principles and practice of safe and effective diver education. For people who have a flair for sales, the dive industry offers many opportunities in retail and wholesale. Diving equipment repair is another source of income for divers interested in diving-related employment. If you have a talent for telling stories, reporting the news, or motivating people with the written word, diving may also have a niche for you. The demand for educational, adventure, and travel writers increases as the sport gains more popularity. If you have an eye for capturing underwater scenery on film or video, you may want to apply those skills below the surface. Underwater photography and videography are very specialized forms of media and require a special talent and flair. For people who like to build, there are excellent opportunities in commercial diving, as well as a multitude of professional dive opportunities to be found beneath the surface. As you can see, diving provides many opportunities and variety. You may not even have thought of the doors that are beginning to open for you as a sport diver.
We hope you've enjoyed this educational program, and we know that by following safe dive procedures and respecting the marine life you come in contact with, your future will hold years of rewarding experiences beneath the sea. We'll see you in the water.